Hey guys, we're just a few days away from the start of the 2025 AFLW season. And so without further ado, let's do our round one predictions. And we start at 7:15 on Thursday night with Carlton vs Collingwood at Icon Park. So last year, Carlton won this game pretty easily, and the odds seem to have them winning as well. Collingwood looked to have a similar injury problem to last year, which was the reason they got the wooden spoon. And I'm not entirely convinced they're going to see a huge amount of improvement from them, at least at the start of the season. I'm sort of going off how the Western Bulldogs went last year, where they sort of started weak and got better. So I think Carlton is definitely the favourites here. I am interested to see how players like Centra will play in Collingwood, but based on the fact that Carlton quite easily defeated the Giants last week in their practice match, I think I can quite confidently say that Carlton's going to win by, let's say, 14. Anyway, later that night at 9:15, we have West Coast playing Gold Coast at Sullivan Logistics Stadium in Perth. Now, last time these two teams played, Gold Coast absolutely smashed West Coast. However, that was 2 years ago. This time, the odds actually have West Coast winning, and I think I agree with them. West Coast definitely had a bit of a fall off at the end of last year, but I think they've definitely locked in their game style and will be a much stronger force this year. On the other hand, I don't have much faith in Gold Coast based on how their season went last year, and I would need to see a lot of improvement for them before I start tipping them. So yeah, I think West Coast is going to win this quite easily. I'm probably going to say by 20. All right, let's jump to Friday with a 6:15 clash between Sydney and Richmond at North Sydney Oval. So last time these two teams met, Richmond won, but I think I'm going to have to agree with the odds here that say Sydney is probably going to win this game. I know a lot of people are predicting a Richmond fall off and in contrast to a Sydney rise, and I think I agree. I know Sydney's done some pretty good drafting this year, but and vice versa, Sydney also doesn't seem to be having many injuries like they did last year when they fell off. So yeah, I definitely think Sydney's going to have the strength here, but I'm not sure it's going to be entirely a domination. I think I'll say Sydney by 8. All right, now we jump to the weekend games with Geelong versus North Melbourne at GMHBA Stadium at 3:35. So obviously last year this was the one draw North Melbourne had. Now that was a wet weather game, and I think the weather's looking to be a lot drier this year. Plus, even if it was wet, I think North Melbourne has learned how to play in the rain. So I think the odds are definitely on North Melbourne, even though I do think Geelong is going to be very good this year, and I do know it's a home game. But yeah, I think North Melbourne's going to win. I don't think it's going to be super dominant. I think North Melbourne's going to win by, say, about 10. But they'll just have that bit of extra class that carries them across the line. All right, later that day, and we get GWS versus Essendon at Manuka Oval at 5:35. The odds are for Essendon, which is obviously a bit of a difficult thing to predict because these teams have yet to play. So this is one of these final, I think, 4 clashes we'll be having this year where the final combinations of teams will finally be meeting. Obviously, being in Canberra, I'll be at this game, so I'm excited to see my first AFLW game live if we exclude that practice match I went to in Werribee. Obviously, I did see the Bombers play in that practice match and they did pretty bad, but it was against North Melbourne, so I think they'll be a lot stronger this time. And GWS is another team like Gold Coast, who I don't have much faith in until I sort of see them perform on field. But I also think Essendon have some issues as well. So I think it's going to be a reasonably low-scoring match, but I think Essendon will pull across. I think I might make it less than a goal. I'll say Essendon by 4. All right. Finally, that evening we have Bulldogs versus Melbourne at Whitten Oval in Footscray. So Melbourne won this game last time these two teams met, but that was about 2 years ago. So things have changed. But a lot of people are pretty confident on Melbourne, although I have heard I think Melbourne is also having a bit of an injury crisis as well that could give the Bulldogs an edge. But it's difficult. Like, this is one I'm going to have to... I think it's going to be another... I think this might be the closest game of the round. So I'm going to have Melbourne just eking out the victory, but I could easily see the Bulldogs winning. So I'm going to say Melbourne by 2. All right, now we jump to the Sunday games with the 12:40 clash between Brisbane and Hawthorn at Brighton Homes Arena in Ipswich. So last time these two teams met was in the qualifier, so it's obviously going to be an interesting grudge game. Because that game was interesting because Hawthorn was the stronger team for most of that game, but inaccuracy allowed Brisbane to get the win and send Hawthorn on their path to going out in straight sets. Hawthorn looks to still be pretty strong. They did a pretty big number on Richmond in the preseason. But I think Brisbane will be the more mature and classy team. Plus, it'll be on Brisbane's home ground. But I do think Hawthorn will give Brisbane a run for their money, so I'm not entirely sure Brisbane will pull away from it. So I think I might say Brisbane by 8, just because I think they have a slightly better start to the season. Anyway, we then jump over to the 2:10 game at RSEA Park in Moorabbin, where St Kilda take on Adelaide. Last time these two teams played, it was actually, I remember being a really close game that Adelaide managed to get a goal near the end and just held on for a narrow win. But I don't think Adelaide's necessarily, I don't think it's going to happen this time. That was a weird game. I think Adelaide will be much stronger this time and win quite easily. St Kilda is another one of those clubs I don't have a huge amount of faith in at the moment until I see some major improvements to their performance. So I think Adelaide's going to actually quite easily demolish St Kilda. I'll say Adelaide by 20. And finally, we get to my beloved Port Adelaide as they take on Fremantle at Alberton at 4:10 on the Sunday. The odds would be interesting because when I think I checked the AFL tipping site, they had Fremantle winning. But according to the fixture site, the no odds are now on Port Adelaide, which I think I agree with those. Like, I know Fremantle bet us last year when we met, but I think Port Adelaide became a much more mature team after that game, and I think we're in a much more stronger position. We've got a really strong lineup of forwards compared to Fremantle, and I think we'll again have the home advantage, which should help us carry ourselves across the line. But it will also be a good predictor to see how well we go. So anyway, just to recap who I think is going to win, I have Carlton beating Collingwood, West Coast beating Gold Coast, Sydney beating Richmond, North Melbourne beating Geelong, Essendon beating GWS, Melbourne beating the Bulldogs, Brisbane beating Hawthorn, Adelaide beating St Kilda, and Port Adelaide beating Fremantle. So come back next week as we see how I went on those predictions, as well as I also predict round 2's results. Until next time, let's go Power!